When Kevin Costner walked up to Whitney Houston's coffin at her funeral, nobody knew he was about to fulfill a promise he made 20 years earlier on the set of The Bodyguard. What happened next would reveal the most beautiful friendship Hollywood never knew about. Before we dive into this incredible story, make sure to hit that subscribe button and let me know in the comments if you've ever had someone keep a promise to you long after you thought they'd forgotten. This story will restore your faith in true friendship. It was 1992, and Kevin Costner was at the absolute peak of his career. Dances with Wolves had won him Academy Awards for Best Director and Best Picture. He was Hollywood's golden boy, the man who could do no wrong. But when he received the script for The Bodyguard, something told him this movie would be different. The story was simple on paper. A former Secret Service agent becomes a bodyguard to a famous singer receiving death threats. But Kevin knew the success of this film would depend entirely on finding the right actress to play Rachel Marin. The studio had other ideas. "We want someone bankable," the studio executives told Kevin during their first meeting. "Someone who's proven at the box office. What about Michelle Pfeiffer? What about Meg Ryan?" But Kevin had someone else in mind. He'd been listening to Whitney Houston's music for years, and something about her voice told him she had the depth and vulnerability the role required. There was only one problem. Whitney had never acted in a movie before. "You want to bet a $25 million movie on a singer who's never acted?" Studio head Peter Guber asked Kevin incredulously. "I want to bet on the right person for the role," Kevin replied, "and that person is Whitney Houston." Getting Whitney to say yes wasn't easy. She was terrified of acting, convinced she would embarrass herself in front of cameras. When Kevin flew to meet her in New Jersey, he found a woman who was confident on stage, but deeply insecure about stepping into unfamiliar territory. "I don't know if I can do this, Kevin," Whitney told him during their first meeting. "What if I'm terrible? What if I ruin your movie?" Kevin looked at this woman who could command any stage in the world and saw something the cameras would love: genuine vulnerability beneath incredible strength. "Whitney," he said, "I'm not asking you to be Meryl Streep. I'm asking you to be you. That's enough." But what Kevin didn't know was that Whitney was battling demons behind her perfect image. The pressure to be flawless, the scrutiny of being a black woman in a predominantly white industry, and personal struggles she couldn't share with anyone were taking their toll. The first week of filming was a disaster. Whitney was so nervous she couldn't remember her lines. She would freeze up during emotional scenes, convinced everyone was judging her. Kevin watched this incredible talent sabotage herself with self-doubt. That's when he made a decision that would change everything. Instead of treating Whitney like a movie star, he decided to treat her like the person she really was, a woman who needed a friend. "Come on," Kevin told Whitney after a particularly difficult day on set. "Let's get out of here." Kevin drove Whitney to a quiet diner in Malibu, away from the cameras and crew. For 3 hours, they just talked. Not about the movie, not about the business, just about life. "You know what your problem is?" Kevin told Whitney as they sat in that little booth. "You're trying to be perfect. Perfect Whitney doesn't exist. But real Whitney? Real Whitney is magic." Whitney started crying. Not the pretty crying you see in movies, but real tears from someone who had been holding everything in for too long. "I'm scared, Kevin," she admitted. "I'm scared I'm not good enough. I'm scared people will see through me." That's when Kevin made the promise that would echo through both their lives. "Whitney," he said, taking her hands across the table, "I promise you something. Whatever happens with this movie, whatever happens in your life, you'll never have to face anything alone. If you ever need someone to remind you how amazing you are, call me. If you ever need someone to tell the world who you really are, I'll be there." Whitney wiped her eyes and smiled. "You promise?" "I promise." Something magical happened after that night. Whitney transformed on set. The woman who had been paralyzed by fear became fearless. She threw herself into scenes with an honesty that took everyone's breath away. But Kevin noticed something else. As Whitney grew more confident as an actress, she began opening up about her personal struggles. The pressure from her family, the expectations of being America's sweetheart, the loneliness that came with fame. "Sometimes I feel like I'm not even a real person anymore," Whitney confided to Kevin during a break between scenes. "I'm just this image everyone wants me to be." Kevin understood that feeling better than most. Fame could be a prison, and Whitney was feeling trapped. You know what we're going to do? Kevin told her. Every day after filming, we're going to do something real. Something that has nothing to do with being Kevin Costner or Whitney Houston. And that's exactly what they did. Some days they would drive to the beach and walk for hours. Other days they would sit in Kevin's trailer and talk about books, about dreams, about the people they were before fame found them. The crew began to notice the change in Whitney. She was lighter, happier, more confident. Her performance in The Bodyguard became luminous because she was finally comfortable being herself. But their friendship deepened when Whitney shared her biggest fear with Kevin. "What if this is all I am?" she asked one evening as they watched the sunset from a Santa Monica pier. "What if when my voice goes, there's nothing left?" Kevin turned to her with an intensity that surprised them both. "Whitney Houston," he said firmly, "your voice is the least interesting thing about you. Don't get me wrong, it's incredible. But you, the woman sitting next to me right now, you're funny, you're smart, you're kind, you're real. That's what people love about you. That's what I love about you." Whitney later said that conversation changed her life. For the first time, someone saw her as more than just a voice, more than just a product. The Bodyguard became a massive success, grossing over $400 million worldwide and giving Whitney one of the best-selling soundtracks in history. But for Kevin and Whitney, the real victory was the friendship they'd built. During the film's premiere, Kevin noticed Whitney seemed overwhelmed by all the attention. While everyone else was celebrating, she looked lost in the crowd of celebrities and executives. "Hey," Kevin whispered, pulling her aside during the after-party. "Remember what we talked about? You don't have to be perfect, Whitney, tonight. Just be you." Whitney squeezed his hand gratefully. "Sometimes I forget who that is," she admitted. "Then I'll keep reminding you," Kevin promised. Their friendship continued long after the cameras stopped rolling. Kevin was one of the few people Whitney could call when the pressure became too much, when the criticism got too harsh, when she needed to remember who she really was. One particularly difficult night in 1995, Whitney called Kevin at 2 a.m., sobbing. "I can't do this anymore, Kevin," she cried. "Everyone expects me to be this perfect person, and I'm falling apart." Kevin got dressed and drove to Whitney's house immediately. He found her sitting on her kitchen floor, surrounded by harsh newspaper reviews of her latest album. "Look at this," Whitney said, holding up a particularly cruel headline. "Whitney Houston, has the voice lost its magic?" Kevin sat down on the floor next to her and gathered up all the newspapers. "You know what I see when I look at you?" he asked, throwing the papers in the trash. "I see the woman who spent 3 hours last week talking to a scared young backup singer, telling her she belonged on that stage. I see the woman who secretly pays for her cousin's college tuition. I see the woman who still calls her mother every single day." Whitney wiped her eyes. "But what if they're right? What if I'm not good enough anymore?" "Whitney," Kevin said firmly, "you are not your reviews. You are not your record sales. You are not what people think of you. You are the kindest person I know, and that will never change." "Kevin never wanted anything from me," Whitney would later tell friends. "He just wanted to be my friend. Do you know how rare that is in this business?" Years passed. Whitney's career soared, but so did her struggles. Kevin watched from afar as the woman he cared about battled addiction, endured public humiliation, and slowly lost herself to forces beyond her control. Kevin tried to help. He would call Whitney during her darkest periods, reminding her of their conversations, of the promise he'd made. Sometimes she would listen. Sometimes she was too far gone to hear him. "I felt helpless," Kevin would later admit. "Here was this woman I cared about, and I couldn't save her from herself." But Kevin never stopped trying. When Whitney attempted comebacks, Kevin was quietly supportive. When she faced criticism, Kevin defended her publicly. When others wrote her off, Kevin continued to believe in the woman he'd met all those years ago. In 2012, the call Kevin had been dreading finally came. Whitney Houston had died in a Beverly Hills hotel room. She was 48 years old. Kevin was devastated. But when Whitney's family called and asked him to speak at her funeral, he didn't hesitate. This was his chance to fulfill the promise he'd made 20 years earlier, to tell the world who Whitney really was. The funeral at New Hope Baptist Church in Newark was packed with celebrities. But Kevin's eulogy wasn't about Whitney the superstar. It was about Whitney the woman. Whitney Houston was not just a voice, Kevin began, his own voice breaking with emotion. She was not just an image. She was not just a product to be sold. Whitney Houston was a real person with real struggles and real beauty. But then Kevin did something that surprised everyone. He shared details about their friendship that had never been public. He talked about their conversations in that Malibu diner. He talked about her fears, her dreams, her incredible capacity for love. Whitney was scared, Kevin continued, tears flowing freely now. She was scared she wasn't good enough, scared people would see through her. But here's what I saw. I saw a woman who loved deeply, who cared about others more than herself, who had a strength that had nothing to do with hitting high notes. Kevin paused and looked directly at Whitney's coffin. 20 years ago, I made Whitney a promise. I promised her that she would never have to face anything alone. I promised her that if she ever needed someone to tell the world who she really was, I would be there. The church was completely silent. Whitney, Kevin said, his voice now just above a whisper, I'm here, and I want everyone to know who you really were. What Kevin revealed next shocked everyone who thought they knew Whitney Houston's story. Whitney Houston saved my life, Kevin said, not the other way around. She taught me that vulnerability isn't weakness, it's strength. She taught me that being real is more important than being perfect. She taught me that friendship isn't about what someone can do for you, but about who they are when no one is watching. Kevin went on to reveal that during the filming of The Bodyguard, he had been going through his own personal crisis. His marriage was falling apart, he was questioning his career, and he felt lost despite his success. Whitney noticed, Kevin said. She asked me one day why I looked so sad, and when I told her, she said something I'll never forget. She said, Kevin, maybe we both need saving. Maybe that's what friends do. They save each other. The revelation that their friendship had been mutually healing, that Whitney had helped Kevin as much as he'd helped her, painted a completely different picture of their relationship. But Kevin wasn't finished. He had one more secret to share. Whitney asked me once what she should do if people forgot about her music, Kevin continued. I told her that her music was just the beginning. Her real legacy would be the people she touched, the hearts she changed, the love she shared. Kevin reached into his jacket and pulled out a letter. 3 months before Whitney died, she sent me this letter, he said. She asked me not to read it until after she was gone. With her family's permission, I want to share part of it with you now. Kevin's hands shook as he unfolded the paper. Dear Kevin, he read aloud, if you're reading this, it means my time is up. I want you to know that our friendship saved me in ways you'll never understand. Every time I felt lost, I remembered that diner in Malibu. I remembered your promise, and I remembered that someone believed in the real me. Thank you for seeing Whitney the person, not Whitney the product. Promise me you'll keep reminding people that we're all just humans trying to do our best. Love always, Whitney. Kevin's eulogy that day lasted 12 minutes, but its impact would last forever. As he spoke, cameras captured the faces in the congregation. Alicia Keys wiping away tears. Clive Davis nodding in recognition. Whitney's mother, Cissy Houston, smiling through her grief as Kevin painted a picture of her daughter that the world had never seen. Whitney had this laugh, Kevin continued, his voice growing stronger. Not the polite laugh she used in interviews, but this real, deep belly laugh that would start small and then take over her whole body. She laughed like that when we were rehearsing the scene where I had to teach her to use a gun. She kept missing the target completely, and finally she just threw the gun down and said, Kevin, I'm a singer, not Annie Oakley. The whole crew was in stitches. The congregation laughed through their tears, and for a moment the church felt less like a funeral and more like a celebration of life. That's the Whitney I want you to remember, Kevin said, looking out at the sea of faces. Not the woman who struggled with addiction, not the woman who made mistakes, the woman who laughed, the woman who loved, the woman who made everyone around her feel a little less alone. After the funeral, dozens of people approached Kevin to thank him for showing them a side of Whitney they'd never known. Music industry executives who had worked with Whitney for years admitted they'd never bothered to know her as a person. You made me realize we failed her, one record executive told Kevin with tears in his eyes. We saw dollar signs where you saw a human being. So that's why I'm here today, he said, to keep my promise, to remind all of you that Whitney Houston was a real person who struggled with real things, who loved with her whole heart, and who left this world better than she found it. But Kevin's promise to Whitney didn't end with her funeral. In the years since her death, Kevin has quietly worked to preserve Whitney's real legacy. He established a scholarship fund in Whitney's name for young women pursuing careers in music and acting. He supported addiction recovery programs, understanding that Whitney's struggles were part of a larger battle many face. Most importantly, Kevin has continued to tell Whitney's real story. In interviews, he focuses not on her problems, but on her humanity, not on her failures, but on her heart. People want to remember Whitney for her problems, Kevin has said, but I remember her for her laughter, for the way she cared about everyone around her, for the way she made people feel less alone. Kevin has also revealed that he keeps a photo of him and Whitney from The Bodyguard set in his home office. It's not a publicity shot. It's a candid photo of them laughing between takes. That's the Whitney I want to remember, Kevin says. Happy, real, free. In 2019, on what would have been Whitney's 56th birthday, Kevin posted a tribute on social media that went viral. He wrote, 27 years ago, I met a scared young woman who was convinced she wasn't good enough. I spent the next 20 years watching her become one of the greatest artists of our time. But more than that, I watched her become one of the best people I've ever known. Whitney, you kept your promise too. You showed me what real friendship looks like. Happy birthday, beautiful soul. Today, Kevin Costner is 69 years old, and he continues to honor Whitney Houston's memory. He speaks at events about addiction recovery, about the pressures of fame, and about the importance of seeing people as human beings rather than products. Whitney taught me that fame means nothing if you don't have real connections, Kevin says. She taught me that success isn't about how high you climb, but about who you lift up along the way. Kevin's promise to Whitney Houston to tell the world who she really was has become a mission that extends beyond their friendship. He advocates for treating celebrities with compassion, for understanding that behind every public image is a real person with real struggles. The friendship between Kevin Costner and Whitney Houston reminds us that sometimes the most important relationships in our lives are the ones that help us become who we're meant to be. Their bond, forged in a moment of vulnerability and sustained through years of trust, shows us what it means to truly see another person. When Kevin Costner walked up to Whitney Houston's coffin that day in 2012, he wasn't just fulfilling a promise. He was honoring a friendship that had changed both their lives. He was reminding the world that beneath the glamour and the fame, Whitney Houston was simply a woman who wanted to be loved for who she was, not what she could do. And in keeping his promise, Kevin Costner gave Whitney Houston the greatest gift anyone can give: the assurance that she would be remembered not for her mistakes, but for her heart. If this story of true friendship moved you, please share it with someone who needs to be reminded that real connections still exist in this world. And remember, sometimes the most powerful promises are the ones we make to see each other's true selves and love each other anyway.